just some quaint saying. Think about what that would mean. You were a slave. You're no longer a slave. But how are you going to make a living? How are you going to live? Well, you've been an agricultural worker, a forced agricultural worker as a slave. But if you're given 40 acres and a mule, what does that give you? A chance for a life. A chance for a life. Very few were actually given the 40 acres and a mule, and of those who were given it, once the federal troops left in 1877, most of them had the land and the mules taken away from them. At that time, throughout the South, there were passed what was called, throughout Southern legislatures, they were called black code laws. And these laws were to ensure subpar political, social, and economic opportunities for former slaves. Ku Klux Klan, black code laws, John Birch Society, and by the end of the century, remember the war's over in 1865, federal troops remained in the South to ensure that the institution of slavery could not reinstate itself. They leave in 1877. It's interesting because before 1877, there were a lot of black people who became mayors and became congressmen and senators, etc. Once the troops left, Southern legislators would have none of it. By the end of the century, you have the full-on spate of lynchings, the hanging not only of black people, but of whites who supported them. So that by the end of the 20th century, you're into full-on institutionalized white supremacy and segregation. None of that was fundamentally challenged until the 1960s. So let's talk about what the timeline is here. You've got slavery that lasts over 200 years, and then you've got 100 years after that, which is a phase, an iteration of violence. It was a different form of violence. It was not abject slavery, but it was abject evil. Let us not kid ourselves about the reality of those years, lynchings and so forth. In 1960s, with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, the civil rights legislation that was passed in the 1960s ensured that discrimination having to do with hiring and political access, and many of those things would be over, and the year after the Voting Rights Act. But let's be very clear about that. The Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. In 2013, the John Roberts-led Supreme Court began chipping away at the Voting Rights Act. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in her dissent, said, it's been raining, we've been using an umbrella. That's good. We're not getting wet because we've got our umbrella. So now this decision means let's not use the umbrella anymore because we're not getting wet. And of course, as soon as they put down their umbrella, what started happening? All these voter suppression efforts throughout this country. And so in many ways, and Obama said this when he was before he left office, he made some comment about how history does not always go forward. Sometimes you go 2 steps forward and 1 step back. When it comes to race in the United States, we've made a lot of progress. I don't want to diminish or dishonor the progress made by our ancestors, black and white. But in many ways, ladies and gentlemen, we're sliding backwards. With voting suppression efforts and with mass incarceration, other issues having to do with criminal justice and so forth. It is time for this generation to take the next step in racial reconciliation. It is not to diminish the progress made, to point out that it is time to take the next step. Since World War II, Germany has given $89 billion in reparations to Jewish organizations. That cannot make the Holocaust not have happened, but it has gone a long way to forge reconciliation between Germany and the Jews of Germany and the rest of Europe. I propose that we have a $100 billion plan of reparations for slavery. And with that $100 billion, that I remind you, is only 1/7, it's actually less than 1/7 of what we're spending this year alone in our military budget. It's time for us to go beyond small and random acts of kindness. We need some huge strategized acts of doing the right thing. We cannot make slavery not have happened. But Germany has done a full-on mea culpa. Germany has done a full-on acknowledgement. Germany has done a full-on recognition. There is a debt to be paid. Ladies and gentlemen, let us do this for our children. The generation, after the generation that fought World War II in Germany, did this full-on mea culpa, and it has been a great gift to the German people. If you're around young Germans today, you can feel that a lot of the karmic toxicity has been flushed out. The war of World War II was over in 1945. The Civil War was over in 1865. We are still dealing with this. We are still going generation to generation. And passing on this debt, this toxicity. It would be such a gift to our children. We can't make slavery not have happened, but it would be an act of great dignity, an act of great respect, and it would be an act of great reconciliation. To choose a council of esteemed African-American leaders would obviously be chosen by the African-American population, Black leaders from academia, from culture, and from politics. Give $10 billion a year over 10 years. And then whatever educational projects, whatever economic projects that this Council of Black Leaders chose as a way of dispersing economic opportunity, as a way of paying back a debt still to be paid. What a gift it would be to our children, and what a sign that this generation would rise up and take care of those problems. Another area where we are at the effect of a spiritual and moral dysfunction, because that's what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is a need for moral and spiritual awakening. This moral and spiritual rot in this country has led to political corruption and has led to human devastation. And just as I was mentioning before, that there's nothing about our economic system that plans for long-term economic vibrancy, there's nothing about our national security agenda that is planning proactively for peace on this planet 25 and 50 years from now. We need to do more than be prepared for war. This country needs to proactively wage peace. Said we have to wage peace. And General Mattis, before he left his position, said that if you're not going to fully fund the State Department, I'm going to have to buy more ammunition. What does that mean? Well, the State Department is that which is in charge of the factors that actually wage peace. The main international factors for waging international peace are, number one, the expansion of economic opportunities for women in the world, the expansion of educational opportunities for children, and an amelioration in whatever way possible of unnecessary human suffering. We should see large groups of desperate people as a national security risk. Desperate people do desperate things. Desperate people are more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. This is as true in a corner of an American city, gangs, as it is true in an international situation where people are prey to organizations such as Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Our military, for which we should all have great respect, should be seen as a surgeon. Like, you want the best surgeon, but you want to avoid surgery if at all possible. We put too much of a burden on our military. You know, we have now transformed our thinking about health and sickness. We now know that you can't not take care of your body, not take care of your nutrition, not take care of your exercise, not take care of your health, your lifestyle, and then just figure that when sickness comes, which it almost inevitably will in that case, you hope that a doctor can somehow give you a medicine that will suppress or eradicate the symptoms. You have to proactively take care of your health. Health is not the absence of sickness. Sickness is the absence of health. We have to look at war and peace in the same way. You can't just wait till there's violence that erupts and build more prisons or drop more bombs in order to suppress it. You need to proactively wage peace domestically and internationally. The State Department internationally, a Department of Peace domestically, so the conflict resolution, so the restorative justice, so the genuine peace-building measures that has to do with addressing what FDR called the beginnings of all wars. FDR said we need to do more than end wars, we need to begin to end the beginnings of all wars, and that is within a desperate heart. This is not soft, this is not silly, this is not ditzy, this is sane. Love is fierce, love is not unsophisticated. The way we are doing things now is what is unsophisticated. The way we are doing things now is naive. You know, one of my favorite quotes has always been from Teilhard de Chardin, that one day after we have mastered the winds and the tides and gravity, humanity would harness for God the energies of love, he said, and then for the second time on earth, man would have discovered fire. Now, I remember reading that when I was in college, and I thought it was so beautiful. I thought, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? If that does not happen, the human race will not survive. That's how evolution operates, ladies and gentlemen. It operates in such a way that when and if a species begins to display behavior that is not adapted, well adapted for its survival, It will either mutate and evolve, or it will go extinct. Our species, at this point in our history, is displaying behavior that is so maladaptive for our survival. First of all, we show no reverence, no care, no good stewardship for the earth itself. At what point are we going to awaken as a nation? And instead of the sick obeisance to the short-term profit maximization of fossil fuel companies and chemical companies, we take care of this issue of fighting climate change, which is the only survivable option for the human race. Just the fact that you may or may not have known about or thought about. Our Air Force has bought 100 B-21 Raiders. I would like to tell you about the B-21 Raider. First of all, each one costs $550 million. And each one of these planes carries both conventional and thermonuclear bombs. Now just take that in for a minute. Why do we need 100 airplanes that can carry thermonuclear weapons? You drop 10 of those, it's so over. Now, I have always felt in my career that I'm not saying anything everybody I know isn't saying. I'm just saying it when the microphone's on. Who among us wouldn't listen to that and go, sounds crazy to me? That's where we're putting our resources, huh? 100, $550 million planes that would carry thermonuclear weapons. Why are we doing that rather than applying that money to ways actually to diminish the human suffering, which so often becomes the petri dish out of which arises pathological dysfunction? Now, if you're waiting for the U.S. government and the politicians within the U.S. government to awaken to that, no, they're not going to. I have a lot of respect for the other people who will be running this campaign. I'm not running against anyone. I'm running with everyone. I think this is a whole all-hands-on-deck moment, and anybody who has any good ideas should be putting them forth. But this is not just about elevating this conversation. That's not why I'm here. I want to help elevate America. And if you expect a traditional politician to be really laying it down, because I'll tell you something about these other candidates, every candidate, it knows exactly what I'm talking about. But they don't talk about these deeper underbellies. What does that say to you about the way the American political system operates at this point? We need a whole lot better than just a better version of the same old, same old. Because most of spiritual awakening in order to fundamentally disrupt the pattern of political dysfunction in this country. We need to deal with the fact that it's a sociopathic economic system. We need to address the fact that these children, millions of them, live in chronic economic despair and trauma. We need to deal with the fact that it's time to take that next step in terms of addressing systemic racial injustice in this country, whether it is social, economic, educational, or criminal. And we need to change the dynamic from preparedness for war as our main modality for peace, and instead know that we must wage peace. There's nothing about just constantly preparing for war that means you are actually preparing for peace. And if the political system of the United States does not have it within itself, because of its obeisance to military industrial contractors, because of its obeisance to fossil fuel companies, because of its obeisance to chemical companies, because of its obeisance to agribusiness, because of its obeisance to big pharma, because of its obeisance to health insurance companies, because of its obeisance to this conglomerate of multinational corporations, it's time for we, the people of the United States, say, maybe you guys won't do it to do it. I want to work with you. I want to co-create with you. New paradigm leadership means that the leader is holding the space for the